year was 2006, and a quiet rural town in Texas became the backdrop for one of the most twisted family dramas that would later shock the nation. At the center of it all was a man named Tom, his younger brother Jake, and Tom's wife Laura. From the outside, their lives seemed perfectly ordinary, a simple, hardworking family with no apparent troubles. But beneath the surface, the dynamics of their relationship were far from conventional, and what began as an attempt to keep the family together spiraled into a web of lies, betrayal, and violence. Tom was the older of the two brothers, a man in his early 30s who had spent most of his life working on the family farm. He was the dependable one, the one who had taken over the responsibilities of their aging parents and kept the family afloat during hard times. Laura, his wife, was in her late 20s, a kind-hearted woman with a quiet demeanor who had married Tom shortly after graduating from high school. Their relationship was steady, if not particularly passionate, and they had been trying to start a family for years without success. Jake, on the other hand, was everything Tom was not. He was impulsive, charming, and had a way of getting what he wanted without putting in much effort. While Tom toiled away on the farm, Jake drifted from one odd job to another, always managing to scrape by, but never settling down. Despite their differences, the brothers were close, and when Jake fell on hard times, Tom and Laura welcomed him into their home without hesitation. At first, everything seemed fine. Jake helped out around the farm and quickly became a part of the household. But as the months went by, tensions began to brew. Laura found herself drawn to Jake in a way she couldn't explain, and Jake, ever the opportunist, didn't shy away from her attention. It started with stolen glances and casual touches that lingered a little too long. Neither of them acknowledged what was happening, but the chemistry between them was undeniable. Tom was oblivious at first, too consumed with the day-to-day demands of the farm to notice the growing connection between his wife and brother. But eventually he couldn't ignore the changes in Laura's behavior. Her sudden bursts of laughter when Jake was around, the way she seemed more alive in his presence. Confronted with his suspicions, Tom did something unexpected. Instead of demanding answers or kicking Jake out, he proposed a solution that he believed would keep his family intact. Tom approached Jake one evening as they worked in the barn. His voice was calm but strained, and he avoided meeting his brother's eyes as he spoke. He told Jake about his struggles with Laura, their inability to conceive, and how he feared losing her. Then, in a tone that betrayed his desperation, he suggested that Jake step in where he could not. Jake was taken aback, unsure if his brother was serious, but Tom insisted, framing it as a way to help the family and give Laura the child she so desperately wanted. Laura was shocked when Tom presented the idea to her. She resisted at first, unable to fathom such an arrangement. But Tom's persistence wore her down. He assured her it would be for the best, that it was the only way to ensure their future together. Reluctantly, she agreed, though her heart was heavy with doubt and guilt. What followed was a secret arrangement that bound the three of them together in a way none of them could have anticipated. Jake moved into the guest room, and Laura spent her nights alternating between the two brothers. It was an arrangement fraught with tension, jealousy, and unspoken resentment. Tom tried to convince himself that he was doing the right thing, that his love for Laura justified the sacrifice. But as the months went on, the cracks in their fragile arrangement began to show. Laura became pregnant, and for a brief moment it seemed like their plan had worked. Tom was overjoyed, and Jake, while uncertain about his role in the child's life, felt a sense of pride he hadn't expected. But the pregnancy only heightened the underlying tensions between them. Tom grew increasingly possessive of Laura, while Jake struggled with feelings of guilt and resentment. Laura, caught in the middle, felt like she was losing herself, torn between her loyalty to Tom and her growing feelings for Jake. The breaking point came one stormy night in November. Tom had been drinking, his usual stoic demeanor replaced by a volatile mix of anger and sadness. He confronted Laura in the kitchen, accusing her of loving Jake more than she loved him. Laura tried to reassure him, but her words only fueled his rage. Jake, hearing the commotion, intervened, and the argument escalated into a physical altercation. Stop. In the heat of the moment, years of suppressed emotions boiled over. Tom accused Jake of betraying him, of taking everything he had worked so hard to build. Jake fired back, accusing Tom of using him and treating him like a tool to fix his problems. Laura tried to break them apart, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The fight ended with a single, fatal blow. In a blind rage, Tom grabbed a nearby wrench and struck Jake across the head. Jake collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath him as Laura screamed in horror. Tom stood frozen, the weight of what he had done sinking in as the storm raged outside. Panicked and desperate, Tom and Laura concocted a plan to cover up the crime. They buried Jake's body on the farm, hoping the storm would wash away any evidence. But the guilt of what they had done haunted them both. Laura couldn't look at Tom without seeing the man who had killed his own brother, and Tom couldn't face himself, knowing he had destroyed the family he had tried so hard to protect. The truth eventually came to light when a neighbor, suspicious of Jake's sudden disappearance, contacted the police. An investigation led to the discovery of Jake's body, and Tom was arrested for murder. Laura, devastated by the loss of both men in her life, was left to raise her child alone, forever haunted by the choices that had led to such a tragic end. The story of Tom, Jake, and Laura became a cautionary tale in their small town, a grim reminder of how desperation and misplaced loyalty can lead to unimaginable consequences. The trial that followed was as much a spectacle as it was a grim reminder of the secrets that can fester within a family. The courtroom was packed each day, with locals desperate to hear every sordid detail of the case that had captivated the town. Tom, once regarded as a steady, reliable figure, now sat solemnly in the defendant's chair, his face a mask of regret. 2-2-10. Laura, pale and visibly shaken, was called as a key witness, her testimony pulling back the curtain on the twisted arrangement that had led to Jake's death. The prosecution painted Tom as a cold-blooded killer, a man who let jealousy and rage drive him to murder his own brother. They pointed to his decision to involve Jake in the first place as evidence of his instability, arguing that such an arrangement was bound to end in disaster. The defense, however, portrayed Tom as a man pushed to the brink by extraordinary circumstances, a husband who acted out of desperation to keep his family intact. Laura's testimony was perhaps the most harrowing. She spoke of the emotional toll of the arrangement, the strain it placed on her relationship with Tom, and the guilt she carried for her part in the tragedy. When asked if she still loved Tom, her answer was hesitant, a quiet "I don't know" that echoed through the courtroom. She admitted that while she felt a deep loyalty to him, the events of that fateful night had shattered any semblance of the life they once shared. As the trial dragged on, more details about the brothers' relationship came to light. Witnesses testified to Jake's charm and recklessness, contrasting it with Tom's steady, if not overly controlling, demeanor. Old family friends revealed long-buried resentments between the brothers, painting a picture of sibling rivalry that had simmered beneath the surface for years. The jury was left to grapple with the question of whether Tom's actions were a crime of passion or something far darker. Tom was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict brought little solace to those involved. Laura, now a single mother, faced the daunting task of raising her child alone, burdened not only by the loss of Jake, but also by the knowledge that her husband would spend the next 2 decades behind bars. The baby, a boy she named Samuel after Tom and Jake's father, became her sole source of hope in the aftermath of the tragedy. But the story didn't end there. In the years that followed, Laura struggled to rebuild her life. She moved to a nearby town, hoping for a fresh start, but the weight of the past followed her wherever she went. People whispered behind her back, judging her for the choices she had made, while others pitied her for the hand she had been dealt. Despite it all, she remained fiercely devoted to Samuel, determined to give him a life free from the shadows of his family's dark history. Samuel grew up unaware of the true circumstances surrounding his father's imprisonment. Laura told him only that his father had made a terrible mistake and was paying the price for it. She visited Tom in prison regularly, bringing Samuel along as he got older, though the visits were often strained. Tom, consumed by guilt, struggled to connect with his son, who viewed him more as a distant figure than a father. As Samuel entered his teenage years, he began to ask questions. He wanted to know why his father wasn't around, why his uncle Jake had disappeared, and why his mother seemed so haunted by the past. Laura, unable to keep the truth from him any longer, sat him down one evening and told him everything. She spared no detail, hoping that honesty would help him understand the choices she had made and the consequences they had faced. Samuel's reaction was a mix of anger, confusion, and sadness. He couldn't reconcile the image of his father as a murderer with the man he had come to know during their prison visits. He struggled with the knowledge that his very existence was tied to a series of decisions that had torn his family apart. But over time, he came to understand the complexities of the situation and the humanity of those involved. As Samuel grew older, he channeled his pain into something positive. He became a social worker, dedicated to helping families navigate their own struggles and avoid the kind of heartbreak his family had endured. He visited his father regularly, their relationship evolving into one of mutual understanding and forgiveness. Tom, for his part, found a sense of purpose in mentoring younger inmates, using his own story as a cautionary tale. Laura, though forever marked by the events of 2006, found solace in seeing her son thrive. She remained a quiet presence in the background, supporting Samuel in his endeavors and finding small moments of peace in the life they had rebuilt together. Though the scars of the past never fully healed, they served as a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for redemption, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy. Years passed, and time began to soften the sharp edges of the pain that had defined Laura's and Samuel's lives. By the time Samuel reached his late 20s, he had become a respected figure in his community. His work as a social worker brought him into contact with families struggling with cycles of abuse, neglect, and despair. Each case reminded him of his own family's turmoil, but rather than being overwhelmed by his past, he used it as a foundation for empathy and understanding. Tom, nearing the end of his sentence, had transformed in ways no one had expected. Prison had stripped him of everything but his ability to reflect. He immersed himself in counseling programs, both as a participant and later as a mentor, finding redemption in helping others confront their own demons. While he would never forgive himself for what he had done, he found solace in the belief that his life could still have meaning. By the time his parole hearing approached, he had built a reputation among both inmates and staff as a man who had genuinely changed. Samuel was instrumental in advocating for his father's release. At the hearing, he spoke passionately about the man Tom had become, not the one defined by his crime. Laura sat quietly in the back of the room, her hands trembling as she listened to her son defend the husband she had loved and lost. She had spent years trying to reconcile her feelings toward Tom, love, anger, guilt, and sorrow swirling together in a complex knot that she had never been able to untangle. But hearing Samuel speak that day, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. Tom was granted parole after serving 18 years. His release was met with mixed emotions. Laura, though supportive, was hesitant to let him fully back into her life. Samuel, now a grown man, encouraged her to take things slowly, reminding her that rebuilding trust would take time. For Tom, walking out of the prison gates was both liberating and terrifying. The world had changed in ways he couldn't fully comprehend, and he had to confront the reality of starting over at an age when most people were settling into stability. Samuel invited Tom to stay with him temporarily, offering him a chance to reconnect not only with his son, but also with the world outside. Their early days together were awkward, filled with long silences and tentative attempts at conversation. But over time, they found common ground in their shared determination to move forward. Tom helped Samuel with his community projects, sharing his own story with families and young men who teetered on the edge of making life-altering mistakes. Laura, meanwhile, watched from a distance. She was proud of the man Samuel had become and grateful for the ways Tom was contributing to his life. But the wounds of the past still lingered, and she struggled to envision a future that included the three of them together. It wasn't until Samuel gently suggested a family dinner that she agreed to see Tom face to face outside of the controlled environment of the prison. That dinner was a turning point. They met at a small diner on the outskirts of town, a neutral space where they could talk without the weight of old memories pressing down on them. The conversation was stilted at first, but as the night went on, they began to open up. Tom apologized for the pain he had caused, his voice breaking as he acknowledged the ways his actions had shattered their lives. Lara, in turn, admitted her own regrets, the decisions she had made, the moments when she had let fear guide her instead of love. It wasn't a perfect reunion, but it was a start. Over the next few years, Tom and Laura found a way to coexist, their relationship evolving into one of mutual respect and understanding rather than the romantic partnership it had once been. They remained connected through Samuel, who served as the bridge between them, his unwavering optimism reminding them that even in the face of tragedy, life could go on. By the time Samuel married and started a family of his own, the shadows of the past had begun to recede. Tom became a doting grandfather, finding joy in the simple moments he had once taken for granted. Laura, now in her 50s, found peace in her role as a grandmother and a quiet observer of the family she had worked so hard to protect. The memory of Jake still lingered, a bittersweet reminder of the choices that had brought them to this point. They honored him in small ways, sharing stories about his charm and humor, keeping his memory alive for Samuel's children, who would never know the uncle who had played such a pivotal role in their family's history. Though the events of 2006 could never be erased, the family found a way to move forward. Their story became one of resilience, a testament to the human capacity for forgiveness and growth. It was not a perfect ending, but it was a hopeful one, a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable pain, the possibility of redemption always remains. And so, life moved on. The pain, the guilt, and the memories never fully disappeared, but they became part of a larger tapestry, a life rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy. Tom, Laura, and Samuel each carried their scars, but they also carried the lessons learned from their shared past. In quiet moments, they would reflect on the choices that had shaped their lives, not with bitterness, but with a solemn acceptance of the complexities of love, family, and forgiveness. As the years turned to decades, the story of that stormy night in 2006 faded from the whispers of the small town, becoming a distant memory for all but those who had lived it. For Samuel, his family's history became a driving force in his work, a reminder that every person, no matter how broken, carries within them the potential for change. For Laura, it was a source of quiet strength, a testament to her ability to endure and protect those she loved. And for Tom, it was a sobering truth that he carried with him to his final days, a life marred by mistakes but not without redemption. When Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, Samuel and Laura sat together by his bedside, their hands clasped in a silent bond of understanding. They mourned not only the man he had become, but also the family they had once been. A family broken, yet somehow pieced back together in the most unexpected ways. In the end, their story wasn't one of perfection or resolution, but of survival. It was a story of love and loss, of choices that could never be undone, but could be faced with courage and compassion. And as they stood together under the open sky, scattering Tom's ashes over the fields he had once worked so tirelessly, they knew that while the past could never be changed, the future was theirs to shape. It was an ending, but also a beginning, a quiet, bittersweet reminder that even in the darkest of times, life goes on.